Hey YouTube gun people, I wanted to go through with you today how to change out the primer feeder from a small primer feeder to a large. Okay, I've already changed the head, I've changed the plate, so the caliber conversion has been done. The only thing I need to do is change the primer feeding system. So let's get on with it. The first thing we have to do is remove this knob here. This is part of the blast shield. This tube here. This whole sleeve gets filled with about 100 primers. It's steel. If there was an accidental detonation forever, you don't want this thing blowing up in your face. This will contain the blast, and this knob will direct the blast up and out. And you need to have that tightened down nice and snug. So you take that knob off, set it aside. Okay. I've already taken off the warning device. That's just sits on there passively. Then you take out the primer feeder tube, and here it is. It's a blue one. You can see it here. Okay, and we're gonna just set that aside for a moment. Okay, we don't need that anymore. Now to take this thing apart, we're gonna zoom in down here so you can get a better idea of what I'm actually up to. Right down here. Okay, so this is an actuator bar. Okay, that when every time you pull the handle, it works the primer feeder system. So that's got to come out, and there's also, you can see right here. Right here is a spring that needs to come out. Okay, and then there are two bolts, one here and one behind it, with an Allen key head on them that you need to take out. So let's just go through this real quick. First thing we're going to do is just take off the spring. You just pull it towards you off that post and just let it hang down. Okay, and you can see the post right here, I believe. Let's see if we can get that a little bit tighter for you. Okay. And this groove right here, yeah, is right where the spring goes. So the loop on the end of the spring goes right in there. That's where it's held. All right. So now all we're going to do is with an Allen key, we simply take off your primer disposal tray. With an Allen key, let's see if I can get the right one here. Here it is. Just go ahead and remove these screws. Now, you don't have to tighten this up like, farmer tight. It should be fairly tight though, nice and snug. Don't torque the hell out of them, just it can be a problem to get off, right? Just loosen them up, then remove them by hand. I think you can see what I'm doing just fine. There's one. That's what they look like. Okay. Set it aside. Here's the other one. Keep your finger on, hold on to the system so it doesn't drop off onto the floor on you. And here's the other one. Set it aside. And this just, if you pick up your, let me zoom out a little bit here. This is all connected to the shell plate. Here is where, when you push forward, I'm not sure well you can see it, this is where your primer gets pushed up. Okay, so what you have to do is to just simply pull down on the handle a little bit. Actually, before you even do that, you can just pull up on your handle a little bit. Okay, and this whole assembly will come out. Yeah, just don't let go of it, because then your screw is going to drop on the floor. Alright, Now let me zoom out for a second and show you what I have here. So what I actually have is the primer feeder, small primer feeder. I'm going to set that aside. We're not going to use that anymore, or for today. We have the actuator bar is what I'm going to call it. I don't know what they call it. You can look it up on the Dillon website. And then you have the assembly. And the way this works is there's that slide here, comes back, picks up a primer, and then goes forward and puts it underneath under the depriming, resizing, and dye. Then when you push the handle forward, the primer gets pushed up into the newly deprimed or resized case. Okay, so let's set this aside for a second. I'm going to show you why. Now, if we pull the handle all the way down, okay, there's another piece here. It's a spacer, right? And what we're going to simply do is also, when we take this apart, clean it. Just take a rag and clean it. Now, I have to say, all these are metal parts. If you have a humid basement, what I prefer to do is use something like Ezox. This is a really good product. It's a dry lubricant. It's not a creeping oil. Do not use any kind of creeping oil. They can get into your primers and deactivate them. Spray it on a rag real light. And just go in here and clean off all the soot. The depriming operation is pretty dirty. You have to understand there's a lot of carbon and burnt residue in that detonated primer that you should. What I'm going to first do is put my spacer that I've cleaned up back in place. Yeah. Now there's two screw holes here. I hope you can see them. There you go. There's two screw holes here. There's two notches on this spacer that just sits in there passively, like so. Right? Take your primer tube with your primer feeder. This is the way this goes. Sorry about the camera work. It's hard to do, but this just can only go in one way. So there's a wheel here, right, to work the actuator bar. It rides on that, and if you just put this like that, and then push it forward, yeah, like so. You want the wheel outside of the metal so it moves freely, of course, and this can just slide back and forth, right? So with that in the forward position, just go ahead and set it down on top of the piece that accepts it. Go ahead and thread in your screws. Now again, if you live in a place or have a humid basement, go ahead and give the screws a little bit of Ezox. It's not going to hurt them. Use a dry lubricant that prevents rust. Again, don't use something that is like a creeping oil. So don't use WD-40. Don't use a gun lube, anything like that. Okay, just go ahead, insert it in here. Get it hand tight. You gotta get all this lined up. Get this one hand tight. Riveting, I'm sure. Alright? Now we're not going to tighten it just yet. Alright? So what I want to do now, we're going to zoom out. We're going to replace the actuator bar. To do that, you just put it, there's a rear facing hole here. Just if you keep this loose, it's a little bit easier to do it. So that's why I'm doing it. This should not be loose like this, but I'm doing it because it's just a little bit easier to get it in there. Once it's all lined up, we'll tighten this thing right down. Right? Goes in like so, right on the bar. And what you can do is just bring it around the front of this the wheel on the primer feeder, and there you have it. Okay, and just ride it up and down. Make sure it works okay. You're going to have to manually move this because the spring's not attached, right? Go ahead and tighten up your screws on the bottom. Now these guys, again, you don't want it loosening up while you're operating it, but if you just put your finger on the Allen key, if you press it till it just starts to slightly bend, you're in the torque range where that ain't going anywhere. All right? Let's zoom back in. So we'll go ahead and reconnect that spring. Again, that spring's just down here, just hanging passively. We just grab it, pull it, and put it over the post right here. And there's a notch that'll accept the spring and retain it. Yeah? So there we go. It returns. You want to make sure that this returns all the way. Okay, there's a stop here. You can see the stop. This has to hit that adjustment nut. You shouldn't have to mess with these, okay, unless you're having problems. All right? Looks good. Yeah, nice. Now the next thing you have to do is change the primer feeder tube because we had small primers in there. Now we're going to put a large one in there. Okay. The small primer feeder tube has a blue bottom. The large primer feeder tube has a red bottom. All right, let's zoom in real tight on this. All right. So here it is. Now what I want to point out to you is this has a notch on it right here. You see that notch? Now what you want to do is feed this into the top here of your blast tube with that ridge pointing directly towards you. Okay? This just sits in there. Now that's too much, right? You just have to slowly turn this and it'll catch and drop down, right? Now it's in position if you actuate the arm, look from behind, look from here, you'll see that red tip down at the bottom where the primer feeds. All right? Always replace your cap, of course, and this should be on there fairly tight. So the cap just goes on like so. Again, inspect it, make sure everything. You can inspect everything. Reloading's not to be taken lightly. Finger tight, okay? Not just loose and flow. Fairly tight. Get a good turn on that. Then you replace your primer warning system. It just sits on top of there passively, and you're good to go. Before we put some primers in it, let's put the catch tray in there. This catches the spent primers. Now we take our primers in a primer pickup tube. I think we've gone through this before. These are large primers, so it's the green pickup tool. We turn this around to where there's a pin here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but see that cotter pin, right? So that's got to be sitting right on top, right? And then what you should do is a follower, right? That comes with the machine. Push it into the top here, right? And that'll just make sure everything clears. So what this looks like then is you get it in this position. There we go. Alright, and all I'm going to do is pull this pin and the primers will fall in. Okay? Let's pull the pin like this. Now, so my pin's here. Don't forget to replace the pin, because if you turn it over you're going to get primers all over the floor and it sucks picking up 100 primers. And you can see if all your primers there, because now my follower is falling all the way down. Okay? Just pull it out. And the way this is replaced, you just simply push your primer warning device down, and this follower keeps the primers on there, is on top of the primers, follows the primers down, and what happens is when you run out of primers, you get close to the end, you have a few left, the weight of this follower will press this down and you'll get an audible warning that you're out of primers. You don't want to start running cases through with no primers, because then you get gunpowder all over the place. Alright? It's as simple as that. Again, I'm going to replace my pin here. Set it aside. There's a couple other maintenance items that I'm, pretty interested in. This primer, this system takes a bit of a beating right here. So here's a small primer. This is filthy from all the soot. So before you put it away, go ahead and clean it up with a rag. Get it looking presentable. You want to get all the kind of soot and stuff out of here, out of this ridge, because you want your primers to get seated to the full depth. If you don't have that, they'll actually, if you don't have that nice and clear or clean, what will happen is you will not get a good seating. You could possibly affect the seating of your primers. Your primers have to be, or not flush with the bottom of the case, they're slightly in. You don't want a high primer, they're dangerous and they can go off inadvertently from even a light strike. Okay? Put that away where it belongs. Let's see how this baby runs. There's a bunch of nice clean 45 cases here. Alright. Now the other thing we have to think about is, now it looks pretty good. Sometimes you have to adjust this spring. So let's focus in here. One thing I forgot to do, so we'll go over it right now, is there's a little spring device here that guides your case into the depriming and resizing station. And the way this has to be set up is when you put a case in there, you want this to be about a credit card's width away from the case. But you don't want it where it can get caught or interfere with the shell plate. Okay? So if you push down and everything, you make sure it clears that shell plate about a credit card's way from that in the case. Put your finger on it, tighten it down with an Allen. Okay, the way to get this to work is cycle it once. Okay, we're going to cycle it once, make sure it picks up a primer. We decap and prime, resize, decap. We push it forward. My hand's in the way, I understand that. But push it forward all the way. Yeah. There you have a nicely new primed case. Right?